I woke up in the morning as usual at the start of the work week. The day promised to be as gray and monotonous as hundreds before it. I put the kettle on, dressed in a shirt and trousers, and ran a comb through my hair. While waiting for the water to boil, I poured coffee into a cup, added milk and sugar, spread a little butter on some bread, and topped it with a thin slice of cheese. After a quick breakfast, I gathered my things and left the apartment. The subway greeted me with its usual chaos and crowding. It seemed as though the entire city was moving toward a single goal, getting to work faster than anyone else. I stood on the platform, inhaling the heavy, damp air, put on my headphones, and stepped into the approaching car. By sheer luck, today I was unusually fortunate. The car was half empty, though at this hour it was usually impossible to find a free spot. I sat near the exit, leaned comfortably against the seat, put on my music, and let it carry away the day's fatigue. My eyes wandered across the car. To my right, near the door, a pretty young woman spoke anxiously into her phone. Judging by her gestures and tone, she was in the middle of some kind of conflict. Nearby, slightly off to the side, stood a young man of about 20, ready to get off at the next station. Across from me sat an elderly man in simple clothing, a small shopping bag resting comfortably on his lap. I noted to myself how ordinary such encounters had become in the capital, some rushing, others seeking peace, some dreaming of faraway things. Watching this quiet tableau, I caught myself wishing for a different life, leaving the office routine behind, traveling to distant countries, abandoning strict schedules and reports. One day, after retirement, I imagined hitchhiking, savoring every moment of freedom and adventure. I scanned my fellow passengers' faces, reflecting on my solitary life. At 30, single and living alone, I felt no attachments except to my apartment and work. I had no family, a dog or a cat remained only a dream, and freedom felt like the only true value worth living for. As memories of past relationships flickered through my mind, I recalled a school crush, a girl from 9th grade with whom I had been friends for years right up until graduation. I had long since lost touch with her. I had no idea where she was or how her life had unfolded. The world around me grew calmer. Music conjured pleasant dreams, and I began to drift unnoticed into sleep. My body felt heavier, my head leaning toward my shoulder, and reality gradually receded into the background. A sudden jolt against the cabin wall tore me from my doze. Instinctively, I grabbed the handrail and realized the train had braked unexpectedly. My head sank onto my shoulder, my body shaking with the movement of the car. For a moment, I didn't understand what was happening until the cold glare of the headlights revealed the cause. Bright electric bulbs flickered like Christmas lights, then went out completely, plunging the car into dense darkness. Whispers of fear rose instantly. People pulled out phones, turned on flashlights, trying to understand what had happened. Some shouted in protest, echoing the general panic. Meanwhile, the screech of the brakes continued to reverberate, sharpening the tension. In the uneven flicker of the lights, I noticed something strange. The elderly man across from me had vanished. In his place stood a stranger, a man in a flawless business suit, strong and well-built, with a strikingly pleasant face. It was unnerving to witness such a sudden change, especially since the car was in motion and no new passengers could have entered. My heart raced, my thoughts surged. The first to speak was the man approaching the anxious girl. He said in a calm, low voice, "There is no point in calling the dispatcher. There is no connection here. The only way forward is through me." His confidence was unnerving. It seemed he possessed knowledge beyond ordinary understanding. The girl's hand continued mechanically pressing the dispatcher button, while her face betrayed growing anxiety. As I tried to process the scene, the young man behind me jumped up, moving toward the doors. A new wave of panic swept through the car. Where were we? Why had the train stopped? The man in the suit seemed to read our thoughts. Your stop lies far from familiar routes. It exists only within the realm of your soul. The words sounded strange and theatrical, yet they demanded reflection. Adrenaline surged, my pulse quickened, and my hands grew clammy. Another moment, and it began. Tension thickened, passengers whispered nervously, checked their bags and pockets, eyes fixed on the stranger one by one. The young man reacted first, shouting, "Hey, what kind of madhouse is this? Explain yourself." The stranger regarded him calmly, with a faint trace of disdain. He said, "I've come to show you something important. Your future depends on the choices you make here, right now."
Quietly cornered Dura, trying to be nothing more than a silent observer. The girl paced nervously back and forth, her footsteps echoing against the metal walls. She jabbed at the dispatcher button with no clear purpose, as if trying to summon someone, maybe a magician. Then she pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she frantically pressed the keys. The device fell silent, ominously still. Damn it, no signal. What kind of dead zone is this? Where are we even? "We've stopped somewhere in a dark corner of your conscience," a voice said suddenly from above. It belongs to the man in the sharp black suit sitting across from me. The girl spun around, her face twisted with anger. "Are you insane? Seriously, haven't you taken your meds in forever?" The man lifted his gaze lazily, as if studying the ceiling of the car. "No, I just noticed something important that you've forgotten. You rarely think about serious matters, but you remember perfectly when it's time to drink with your friends on a Friday night." "Hey, easy there," I said, standing up, unable to stay silent. To my surprise, the stranger waved his hand indifferently, his eyes still fixed somewhere in the distance. "Oh, a new spectator has joined. Let's get acquainted. My name is Mark, although, to be honest, most people find it easier to perceive my name that way. My true name is far more complicated." "So, you're Napoleon?" I asked, the sarcasm slipping out. "Far from it," Mark smiled faintly. "I can see right through the three of you, Alexander, Maria, and Dmitri." His calm confidence sent a shiver through the passengers. Eyes dotted nervously, everyone sensing the strangeness of the moment. "So, your business is not with us. Most criminals are far from here, probably not in the subway," Maria muttered, reaching for a cigarette. "That's true," Mark replied calmly. "Criminals face consequences thanks to your law enforcement. My work is entirely different." "Then what the hell are you brewing here? Maybe just slam the door and let us all out," Maria snapped, frustration flashing in her eyes. "No problem," Mark said, snapping his fingers. The metal doors of the car swung open instantly. But beyond them was nothing, an endless void devoid of anything real. The passengers froze at the threshold, stunned and hesitant. "Well, if no one's ready to step outside, we can continue our conversation," Mark said, watching our reactions closely. Silence fell over the car. Every passenger was absorbed, captivated, unsettled. The train seemed suspended in the middle of nowhere, leaving only questions and unease. Who was this enigmatic man, and why had he appeared here, in this place that seemed to exist outside reality?
"Let's start with you, Maria," Mark said unexpectedly, addressing the girl. His voice was soft but confident, as if he already knew the reaction his words would provoke. The girl tensed noticeably, casting a wary glance at the others. It was clear she realized the conversation ahead would likely be uncomfortable. "How is your mother?" Mark asked directly, tilting his head slightly, as if expecting an honest answer. Maria paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Finally, she spoke cautiously. "She's doing okay, as much as possible for a woman her age." Her tone betrayed some uncertainty, as though she wanted to appear composed but internally felt vulnerable. "Huh, interesting," Mark murmured thoughtfully, staring at her. "I'd be curious to hear your definition of a normal age for an elderly person." Sensing the hidden implication of the question, Maria frowned involuntarily. "Well, Because the age of elderly parents sometimes becomes a problem for children and grandchildren. That's why some send them to care homes. I don't think such institutions are bad. They take care of the elderly, organize activities, keep them entertained. Of course, it seems less appealing if a parent has relatives who can care for them at home. But there are situations where this is the only option. Mark seemed amused watching the shift of emotions cross her face. He smiled slightly, which made him appear even more enigmatic. If you admit that it's a good idea, I have some questions for you as well, he added, pausing. What kind of questions? Maria asked tensely, clearly trying to restrain herself. For example, a simple one. Have you ever visited the institution where your mother is kept? Mark asked directly. An awkward silence followed. Maria murmured barely audibly. I went when I brought her there. So your contact with your mother is limited to delivering her to the institution. And then she called you, complaining about the living conditions. Private facilities are often expensive and subpar. She complains all the time. Believe me, it's not as bad as it seems. I had to send her there because of my work and financial difficulties. Hiring a nurse is too costly, and I can't care for her myself. She's had leg problems for over 2 years. Mark watched her carefully, weighing each word. After a minute, he slowly rose and gestured toward his outstretched hand. Come here, Maria. Take my hand. She approached hesitantly, her palms damp with sweat. Upon touching Mark's hand, a sharp flash of light enveloped her. In an instant, she found herself inside a small room of a nursing home, designed for 6 beds. The room appeared neglected. Peeling walls, broken furniture, dirty windows letting in dim daylight. Nearby was a bed with a frail woman, evidently her mother. The old woman stared blankly upward, almost motionless. Next to her, a roommate whispered quietly, "No one cares about us. Even cleaning is rare. They only care about the money and feed us like cattle." Maria's mother added sadly, "We can barely even wash properly. At least Lilia Mikhailovna helps, brings water, or we'd be lost." Maria felt as though lightning had struck her. Tears streamed down her face as she grasped the reality of her mother's situation. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, covering her face with her hands. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'll take you home immediately. Forgive me. I truly didn't know how hard it is here." A bright light blinded her again, returning her to the subway car. Maria's eyes were wet with tears, her lips trembling. Mark observed her reaction with keen interest. "Enjoy the trip?" he asked casually, crossing his arms. Maria couldn't find a word, her tears continuing to fall. Mark nodded briefly, satisfied with the effect he had created. Now let's see who's next. Part 4. Dmitri. Everyone was silent, overwhelmed. Maria was still sobbing, her eyes red and wet. Tears ran down her pale face like drops of rain. Her gaze seemed lost, reflecting only pain, shame, and deep despair. She appeared to have drifted far away, torn between past and present, torn by guilt and helplessness. Mark slowly approached Dmitri. He sat tensely, curled in the chair as if bracing for something terrible. His face was flushed, hands trembling. Thoughts jumbled in his mind, heart racing as though it trying to escape. He stared straight ahead, oblivious to the world around him, absorbed in his own emotions. No one knew exactly what Maria had seen, but her expression said it all. She had experienced something unbearable. "Well, let's see," Mark said quietly, almost like a verdict. Dmitri froze, raising a puzzled look. Moments later, He understood Mark's intent and nodded silently. Slowly, he extended his hand toward Mark's. Their fingers touched, a bright spark flared, and the room vanished. Now Dmitri stood amid the chaos of a ruined reality. Dirt was everywhere. The smell of tobacco mingled with rotting scraps and damp laundry. Dust coated the windows thickly, and light penetrated in dull patches. An old table with a battered top sagged under piles of trash and food remains. A gray sofa appeared broken long ago, its cushions torn and frayed. Scattered around were countless plastic bottles of cheap alcohol, clothing strewn across the room. Even the floor had become a mire of dirt and unknown liquid stains. Insects scurried, hiding in dark corners. Each step stuck to the slick floor, sending shivers through him. The sense of unease deepened with each glance around. This room mirrored the nightmare of Dmitri's childhood. Old years of desperation and struggle with loneliness returned, black tentacles of fear sweeping through his consciousness, leaving painful traces in memory. It all seemed incredibly familiar. He had lived in such a place for a long time before finally escaping that hell. In the corner, two human figures lay side by side, lost in the stupor of alcohol. It was his mother and father. Both slept deeply, breathing heavily and strained. Their appearance was neglected. Tangled hair, dirty and torn clothes. The contrast with the family's former life was striking. The thought of returning to the place he had fled years ago tightened his chest with icy pain. This was where his story of growing up, surviving, and enduring hardship began. He had run away, leaving his younger brother behind, a small child abandoned among greedy and cruel adults. He had decided to start anew in Moscow, which welcomed him, giving him a chance to change his fate. The first days in Moscow were the hardest. Without money, connections, or housing, he accepted any job offered, grabbing every chance to earn at least a little, just to survive, to pursue his dream of independence. Life gradually changed thanks to a few kind people, notably a couple who ran a small cafe. They took him in, helping him morally and financially, allowing him to attend college, providing a roof over his head. For the first time in years, he felt genuine care, which he had been deprived of as a child. But now fate returned him to the past. The flash of light brought him back to the room he had struggled to forget. His father's voice pierced the silence. He shouted at an approximately 8-year-old boy. "Artyom!" The man's voice was sharp and irritated, revealing the depths of his drunkenness. The boy appeared instantly from the next room, visibly nervous. Fear showed on his thin face, his skin unhealthy. Afraid of his father's reaction, he froze at arm's length, drawing his head into his shoulders and lowering his gaze. His small body tensed, expecting a blow. The man pointed to a table near the sofa, ordering him to bring another bottle. But when the boy approached, he saw only shards of broken glass and a puddle of strange liquid. Frightened, Artyom tried to explain. "Dad, it's empty," he mumbled, his voice trembling. The man jumped to his feet, red with rage. Eyes bulging, he lunged at his son, grabbing the small arm. Shocked, Artyom cried loudly, begging for forgiveness, insisting it wasn't his fault. The man shoved him back against the wall, and he fell to his knees, bruising his elbow. Terrified and in pain, he hurried to his room, barely restraining his sobs. The woman on the sofa didn't move, still lost in her drunken stupor. Dmitri looked at his younger brother, feeling the familiar helplessness. He understood why he had left Artyom.
"Well then, Alexander, it's your turn," Mark said, extending his hand toward me. Without thinking too much, I confidently responded, reaching out my palm. But the moment our fingers touched, a sharp, almost painful impulse flashed before my eyes. The world disappeared, replaced by a new space. A strange scent of home and freshly baked bread filled the air. Looking around, I suddenly realized I was standing in an apartment completely unfamiliar to me. The walls were covered with soft beige wallpaper. The neatly arranged furniture exuded simplicity and coziness. The quiet creak of the floorboards under my feet accentuated the strangeness of the moment. Suppressing a slight dizziness, I cautiously moved forward, listening to my senses. From around the corner came the rustle of paper. Someone was reading. Rounding the sofa, I met the gaze of a 12-year-old girl, absorbed in a book with bright illustrations. Her hair was tied neatly in a ponytail, and her light eyelashes trembled over the open pages. Behind me, a gentle yet authoritative female voice called, "Katya, come have lunch!" My heart skipped a beat, rising sharply into my throat. That voice, I had heard it long ago. Even after all these years, my memory had preserved its sound. Driven by an unclear feeling, I followed the girl into the dining area. Katya quickly closed her book, glanced at the clock, and calmly said, "Already 3 o'clock," before heading to the table. But the next scene literally took my breath away. Before me stood a slender woman so familiar and close that tears welled up in my eyes. Her amber gaze met mine, yet she didn't see me, as if looking through me. It was her, my school friend, my first childhood love, Dasha. More than 10 years had passed since we parted forever. My life had taken a different path, but I often remembered her laughter, our confidential talks and shared dreams. Now, face to face again, I felt lost and a little afraid. It was as if I had encountered a ghost of the past, brought to life, ready to remind me of all that had been forgotten and lost. The phone rang sharply, cutting through the silence of the kitchen. Dasha quickly picked up. "Hello?" "Oh, hi, Aunt Dasha. It's Ksusha." "Hey, Ksusha. Is Katya home?" the girl asked. "Yes, she's having lunch. Do you want to tell her something?" "Yes, my dad and I are going to the amusement park this weekend, and I wanted to invite Katya to join me." Dasha paused for a moment. "All right, that's fine. She'll call you back later." Dasha gently hung up and turned to her daughter. "Katya, you heard. Ksusha is inviting you to the amusement park this weekend. Are you going?" Katya swallowed the last bite of her sandwich and nodded. "Yeah, I'd go. I'll call her back later." She finished her tea and immediately changed the subject. "Mom, why do you never tell me about my dad? Where is he? Why doesn't he live with us?" Dasha finished washing the dishes in silence, slowly dried her hands with a clean kitchen towel, and sat beside her daughter. "Sweetheart, I've long wanted to speak openly with you. Your father is not an astronaut or some storybook hero. I won't invent tales about him flying to the moon." Her voice trembled, but she continued calmly and confidently. "When I was in 9th grade, I fell deeply in love with a boy, my classmate. We were inseparable and genuinely happy together. It lasted almost 2 years, until one day I realized I was expecting you. I told him right away, but your future father's joy was uncertain. He was frightened. His parents insisted on terminating the pregnancy and hurriedly took him to study in the capital. I decided to keep you. Your grandparents supported me, and thanks to them, we were able to get through that difficult period. Our story is far from romantic, to be honest, but truth is more important than pretty tales." Katya listened attentively, pondering her mother's words. "Show me at least a photo of Dad." Dasha sighed quietly, stood, and retrieved an old-school album. Together they flipped through the pages, examining photographs of young faces and shared school events. Dasha looked at her daughter's face and suddenly felt a hot tear run down her cheek. She bore a striking resemblance to the boy Dasha had lost so many years ago. "Why are you crying, Mom? Everything's okay," Katya whispered, snuggling closer. "It really is, sweetheart," Dasha replied, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Sometimes old memories just come rushing back, that's all." I silently watched the scene unfold, feeling tears slowly rolling down my cheek. She was astonishingly similar to me, so much so that my heart ached at the realization. I had never considered my role as a father. The child from my school memories had seemed distant and faceless, as if my involvement in their life had been a mere fleeting moment long ago. I had never thought about how my child lived, what they looked like, or even whether it was a girl or a boy. But now, before my eyes, stood a real girl, almost a copy of me, deprived of her father's presence, living in an incomplete family. An intense desire arose to change the past, to reclaim the lost years, to restore the bond between us. But could one person truly alter a history built over years of indifference and neglect? The question tormented my soul, remaining unanswered. Another bright flash transported me back to the subway car, where I once again found myself immersed in my own thoughts. "Well then, Alexander, it's your turn," Mark said, looking at me. I remained silent, completely bewildered and overwhelmed by the flood of emotions. Mark returned to his seat, carefully studying each of us in turn. For several long minutes we sat in complete silence, absorbed in our own experiences. Finally, Mark broke the prolonged pause. "So, let's summarize our journey. I am merely an observer. The responsibility for your actions falls upon each of you individually. My task is to allow you to see your choices and their consequences from the outside, to draw your own conclusions and make your own decisions. I hope we will not meet like this again." I snapped back to reality when the announcement of the next stop came. Opening my eyes, I saw the elderly man opposite me, smiling slyly over his glasses. Slowly, I rose and moved toward the doors, waiting for the train to arrive. When the train stopped, the doors opened, and I calmly exited, moving toward the subway's exit. Reflecting on all that had happened, I knew one thing. Over the weekend, I would return home to the place where this entire tangled journey had begun.